Hi, thanks for joining us for our webinar on social connections. I'm excited to introduce Karen Bohal Ortega, our presenter for today, and I'm going to just let you take it away, Karen.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you to the folks who are on today. I also really appreciate you being able to shift to 11 o'clock. I know that initially we had it set for 10, but I totally blanked on an appointment I had this morning. So this is our third of 5 in the webinars in the Strengthening Families, the 5 Protective Factors. I imagine some of you guys have been on for the first 2 on social emotional competence and then child development. Today's is actually a look at social connections, and I'm actually going to start with a little story I just told Debbie that's really highlighted the importance of having folks to turn to. So I'm a little off this morning because about half hour ago I was on the Muni and I was coming in to do the webinar, and I ran into a client that I had worked with before and actually had done therapy with for about a year. He was 16 at the time that we were meeting together, and he turned to me, he got on the train, he turned to me, and I looked at him and I thought, okay, he might not want to acknowledge me, that's okay. And then he looked and he said, Karen. And I kind of noticed what he was wearing, and it looked like he was homeless. And I said, how you doing? And he looked and he said, essentially confirmed what I had thought. And he said, I'm living on the streets now. And first thing I said, does your mom know where you are? And he told me no. He said, I'm all alone. He said, everyone's left, my stepdad, my mom. I actually know he had a kid that's probably about 2 now. And he started to tear up. I asked, if he had a cell phone. He said he didn't. And I was going to try and give him my business card. I've already talked to Debbie about I'm going to try and get back down to where he got off the train, see if I can find him. But, it's a very different situation when we don't have people to turn to. And when I was initially working with him, he had his family supporting him, he had services in place, and he was doing pretty good. And so to see him today is a little disheartening, and I want to see what I can do to get him connected to folks again. So that is my goal after this webinar is done, is to actually hop back on the Muni and get down to the Civic Center and see if I can find him to give him some resources and just to check in with him. So the importance of social connections, the importance of having people to turn to, definitely was highlighted this morning for me. So if I get a little bit teary or whatever else might come up today, I'm just letting you guys know in advance that was a tough situation, but I just keep thinking if I can get him connected again, if I can get him connected. So that's where I'm headed after this. Okay, so we are going to focus on social connections. Let me see if I can get these slides to advance. We're going to look at the essential elements of today's webinar. What are social connections? How social connections fit into the framework. So it's that logic model that we'll review. I know it's been a few months, but we'll take a quick look at that again. The important role of communication, social connections and parental involvement, and then the everyday actions. I know that's been something that we focused on each time, and a lot of these things you're already doing, but we really want to continue to focus on what are our everyday actions that build positive social connections. All right. So what does it mean to have social connections? As this is an example of what the Strengthening Family One parent said, it's about not being alone. It's realizing that other people are there and sometimes have the same problems. And I know this probably feels like, yeah, we get this, we understand. But I think that sometimes, even though we understand that social connections are important, it's easier said than done. It's easier to say we need to reach out, we need to do this, we need to do that. But actually working with families and supporting families to understand how to develop those connections is a whole nother ball game. So we might know it's something that we need, but it's not as easy as just saying you have to make friends. We really want to look at how do we help support families to be able to make those connections. The basis of the 5 protective factors, I think this goes back to the training that I did last spring, and I hope I've mentioned it, but I might not have. It's actually based in wanting to look at reducing child abuse and neglect. I know that that's where a lot of the funding also comes for family resource centers. It's they're community-based centers, and the funding is driven. Oh wow, I think the heater just popped on here. Sorry if you guys can hear that. Welcome to the old building at Support for Families.
Karen, can we check in? I've got one person who said they can't hear.
Okay.
Can you guys raise your hands if you can hear? Of course, again, if you can't hear, you're not going to raise your hand. So, okay, we've got hands going up.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to have to assume that the folks who are having challenges are having them locally.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, the fun of technology.
I know.
Well, hopefully for the individual who can't hear, hopefully when we record this, we post it, it'll be something that at least you can go back and check out.
Excellent.
So now I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, that the 5 protective factors is rooted in looking at what are these 5 factors that help families to reduce the possibility of child abuse and neglect. And when you think about it, not being alone, not feeling isolated, one of the things that I think about is isolation isn't just someone not having people around them. It can be caused by living in communities where there's a lot of violence and not wanting to leave your home because you're worried about the safety of your family or child. That happens a lot in public housing in San Francisco. There are certain pockets that have quite a bit of community violence, and I know families that they need a roof over their heads, so they live in public housing, but they don't go out and congregate in the community spaces, and that can really feel isolating. Sometimes we move. Families need to relocate for different things and they lose their community. Sometimes there's issues with family and friends around that it's not safe for them emotionally or physically, or there's been rifts in the family that's taken them away. And sometimes we're just so busy as parents. I mean, you guys know that when you have a child who has a special health care need or challenging behaviors or a disability, that often adds additional stresses, meaning, challenging behavior makes it difficult to go to the store at times. It might mean that there's additional services that a family has to go to in addition to work and all these other things. And just being busy makes it harder to find time to socialize and to create those connections. And when you have situations like that, it increases the level of parental stress. And when you increase the stress in your life, even if you don't mean to, it's just something that happens, it can absolutely undermine your ability to parent in the way that you want to. When you have additional stress, it is so much harder to respond to your child in a way that is something that feels good to you or that you've put a lot of thought into. I know when I'm the most tired is when I'm the most short with my son. It's not when I'm patient. It's not when I feel like I can really sit through and work something through with him. When I'm late for work in the morning, that's when I often go into mommy voice and I go, I'm really frustrated right now. I'm getting really upset. We're going to be late. And that's not a bad intervention, but it's not the greatest. So that's something to think about. When we're isolated, depending upon the situation, there's lots of things that can get families there. It can really undermine our ability to parent the way that we want to parent. And then I want to point out just some of the things that social connections bring into a family's life. And I'm sure you guys know this, but I just want to point it out too, is if you have people around you that you can count on, a lot of times they can help take care of your child here and there for free. When it comes up to finances, if I can drop, my son off with extended families and not have to pay them for that, that is huge, because finances are a huge part of a family's life, especially families who come from a low-income situation or who have lots of bills, depending on if a child has a special health care need or if they're trying to work through their insurance and it's not happening. Social connections also bring you together with people who like to do the same things as you. Being able to get out of the house to do activities together that you can enjoy with other families. They give you opportunities to take a night off, to relax, and then it's someone to be able to share the ups and downs with. I think a lot of times we get into our own head and we're thinking about, am I a bad parent? Am I this? Am I that? Why can't I, do this right so that my child will behave in a way that's acceptable? And I think when we open up and we find those connections and we talk to other people, that's when we start to realize, this kind of stuff is normal. Mostly every child at some point is going to have a tantrum and a breakdown. I was actually last week at the ICC with some of the folks from the FRCNCA and the steering committee meeting, and I usually stay with my friends, and they have 2 twins. And I was sitting down with the mom one night, and she was talking to me about her daughter who has a really difficult time regulating her emotions. She gets very upset and throws tantrums. And at one point she started crying, and she was telling me a story about how embarrassed she was when her daughter threw a tantrum for about an hour over something with family and friends around over the holidays. And I said, you know, I think maybe you're not spending enough time with me, because if you saw my son, he is strong-willed and feisty, and he will absolutely do that too. And one of the best things that I've ever heard from another mom is she said, when you feel embarrassment, that's the time to think about, is this about me or is this about them? And I think when I start to feel embarrassment, that it becomes about me. And what I want to do is actually shift my focus back to my child. And so me and the other mom were talking about that, and she said, you know, you're right. And she said, most of the time I feel judged. And just being able to have that opportunity to talk. And then I told her some of the things I witnessed between her and her daughter that were really positive patient strategies. And she just said at the end, you know, I feel so much better for being able to talk about this. Like, I felt alone. I felt like people didn't understand my circumstances. So just having people that you can share the ups and downs with is definitely important. Other things like picking your child up from school. If you have someone in your social connection, if you have an emergency come up and you're going to be late, just being able to say, hey, can you get them today? And it's not for everyone. We can't always do that, but that's a possibility as well. Sometimes hand-me-downs, getting gear or things that someone else has, baby gates, things like that. That's what social connections can do as well. And then I do want to point out that social connections don't necessarily mean that it has to be someone you see face to face. Well, I think that's the most impactful. We don't always have the time for that. So I do want to point out that I think that people can seek out help from other folks in kind of virtual worlds, meaning social networking, that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to actually quickly pose a question. Does anyone's FRC actually utilize any online groups?
Okay, if you guys want to raise your hands or type in, I guess either way, if you have one you want to share. Okay, we've got one hand up, a couple of hands up.
Okay. I know some of the FRCs have started using Facebook groups, and like I said, while it's not for everyone, I do think that there's some benefits to being able to have that situation for families just in case it comes up, especially because when you think about virtual social networks, those are things that parents can access at all hours of the day. You know, I personally, some of the hardest time during the day is at night when you're thinking about what you could have done better, you're stressed out. Most of the time your child is asleep, so you have a little bit of space to be thinking about stuff. And it's accessible 24/7. You can get up at 11 o'clock and you can post something on your Facebook group and just reach out and see if anyone has anything they have to say. Like I said, I don't think it's the end all, but it's one of the modes of communication and reaching out to other folks that some families can utilize.
And Karen, if I can share, just from, I don't know, a lot of you may know, we have a new little one in our family who's very rare, like less than 1 in a 2 or 3 million or 4 million disorder. And the Facebook group has been the only way to connect with somebody else. So I think especially for folks who have it doesn't get that local thing, but it does give the advantage to being able to connect with other folks who are in your shoes. So,
yeah, and they've been doing a lot of studies on telehealth and looking at it for like individual therapy and group therapy, and then also discussion forums. And a lot of the research is coming back saying that parents are saying that it really is helping. It's really supporting. So that's something that folks are utilizing a lot more. And what's good about the Facebook groups, at least, that you can put it to private. So, and a lot of them you can actually put different settings, so you can kind of make sure that the folks who are in those groups are families that you're actually serving at your FRC, or you can kind of vet them to make sure that they that it would be appropriate for them to be in the group.
And Nikki just shared that they refer families with rare genetic conditions to online groups. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when you, especially like you were saying, Debbie, you know, when you have a very rare and specific condition, that, I mean, you can make connections globally if you need to, you know, and especially when there just aren't people who have similar experiences in close proximity. You know, that technology allows us to talk to people from all over, which is great. So I have a video. Debbie and I tried it out, and the same thing as normal. You guys won't hear the sound. So I put on the closed captioning so that you can read what's being said. I just want to set this up. This is actually something that they did. Oh, I want to say New York, but I can't remember, where it was a place for people to actually come up and take a seat and talk to someone that they don't know. So you're going to see some folks who come through and have different dialogue. I might not play the whole thing, but if I apologize again for the sound. We figured out it might have something to do with a certain with using Chrome, but just take a look at it. I'll ask you guys to take a look after this. I think this is something that you can absolutely use with families as well, and I put the link to the YouTube video up there. So let's watch a little bit of it, and then I'll pose a question after it's done. Oh wait, I just realized this might not show the closed captioning unless I go out. All right, here we go. All right, so I know that was probably hard not being able to hear what they were saying, but I hope that you guys kind of saw the gist of that. You know, it's an experience about putting two folks together who are completely unknown to each other, offering up an opportunity to engage in dialogue. And I love the part about the people who take out their fake teeth. And, you know, it's something to keep in mind, is that I think we often have more in common with folks than we think we do. It sometimes just takes us really taking a moment to just sit down and engage in dialogue to get to know them. So I wanted to put this question out there. It's not something you need to answer, but I just want you to think about, when you see this video, and I'm sure you'll love the little cute music that is involved in it when you look at it later, but I want you to think about how you might share this with your staff, like how you might use something like this, whether it be the concept or the idea of having the questions where you can sit down and really help folks engage in dialogue, or showing the video and seeing what families think about it. So that's something I want to pose to you, is just to be thinking about how could you utilize this in the work that you do.
I have to say, it made me tear up, which was a weird reaction because I'd seen it even before. And so I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's, no, I appreciate that, Debbie, because I think that sometimes we are hesitant to get to know other folks because we make assumptions, or we believe that they are different than us, or it just seems difficult. And, I'm someone that people have always told me, your friends are so different and unique. And that's because to me, I don't, they might feel different things than me, or they might have different values in certain ways, but I think there are always things that we can find in common with each other. And I would rather be connected to other people that are unique and have special attributes in whatever way that is, than to isolate myself because I've made assumptions, or because I feel that we won't connect. Because I really think deep down we will. There are things that we can find together. So the fun stuff about the logic model, most folks have seen this already. So I know that I often tell you guys to start from the right and work back to the left. So you can start with the results, the strengthening families, 5 protective factors. The hope behind this is to strengthen families, to look at optimal child development, and to reduce the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. And then if we move over, we look at, these are the 5 protective factors that will create those results: parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete supports in times of need, and social and emotional competence of children. And then when you go to the left a little bit more, we look at, there's program practice. So that's what your agencies and your FRCs are choosing to do. So we're looking at shifting organizational culture to value and build upon family strengths. So, we look at, this is not a curriculum that you have to follow, step by step. It's an approach. It's a shift in focus to approach families from a strength-based perspective. We look at making agency policies to support changes in worker practice. So instead of telling families what to do, we look for strengths, we work with them, we empower them. And then we implement everyday actions. So these are shifts that an agency is going to make to instill these 5 protective factors, the 5 protective factors framework, into the work that they do. The individual workers, so the worker practice is you. It's looking at having knowledge of the protective factors, so you can look at how to help these families build skills. It's about changing your approach to the relationship you have with parents. And like I said, it's about implementing the everyday actions that support families to build these protective factors. A lot of them folks are already doing, but sometimes it's nice to just highlight, hey, I do that already. Or, you know what? Maybe I have another idea based on some of the things that we're doing. And then the core functions over here on the left, that's actually kind of statewide, societal level. How do we shift things? How do we build parent partnerships? That's a big piece of the, not necessarily, was looking for the specific word, not agenda, but that's one of the core pieces of the FRCNCA that I see when we go to these statewide stakeholder meetings. We're really looking at, and this is Family Voices as well, how do we make sure that families are partners with those big stakeholders, that they're brought to the table, that they're asked questions and they're listened to? It's about deepening the knowledge and understanding of supporting families at a statewide level, at a larger level, about shifting practices, policies, and systems, and then ensuring accountability so that families are supported in the way they need. All right, and then this is just looking a little bit deeper into it when we talk about those everyday actions. Usually after this, I actually have you guys write down some, but I'm going to do that at the end. I'm going to have you write down some everyday actions once we complete the webinar. So specific strategies, we're looking at facilitating friendships and mutual support. So I think the biggest part of what we can do to support families at the FRCs is to help them connect with each other and develop social networks. I know a lot of folks run parent support groups, caregiver support groups. They have different activities and events where they bring families together. So that's a huge strategy to build social connections. And then specific everyday actions that are involved in those strategies. Some of the examples are helping families value, build, sustain, and use social connections. Like I said at the beginning, it's easier said than done. You know, we know that social connections are important so we don't feel isolated, but how do we do that? How do we create those when we're overwhelmed, when we might not have the time, or sometimes we're an introvert, or we're embarrassed, or we think we're the only ones who are experiencing this? It's about creating an inclusive environment. I know that's key to most of the work that we do, is how do we create an environment where there isn't judgment, where everyone is welcome? It's about facilitating mutual support around parenting and other issues, promoting engagement in the community and participation in community actions. The protective factors, social connections, and that's how we reach our results for the 5 protective factors about strengthening families, optimal child development, and reducing child abuse and neglect. All right, so social connections. Parents with a social network of emotionally supportive friends, families, and neighbors often find that it is easier to care for their children and themselves. Most parents need people they can call on once in a while when they need a sympathetic listener, advice, or concrete support. Research has shown that parents who are isolated with few social connections are at a higher risk for child abuse and neglect. So that's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time, is when you don't have people to reach out to, your level of parental stress increases, which actually undermines your ability to parent the way that you want to parent. So it is so important to reach out and to have people that are important in your lives. I actually like to say social connections are the antidote to isolation. So the more social connections that we can create, the less likely we are to feel isolated. Something else to think about is, you know, social connections are built on our ability to communicate and on our opportunity to communicate. So not only are families going to differ in their ability to communicate their needs or their desires or whatever it might be to other folks, but also it's that piece about opportunity to communicate. So that's where I think we can not only help families by facilitating parent support groups and helping engage families in communication, but it's an opportunity that we're offering them to bring families together in a parent support group. So I just want you guys to think about, you don't have to say it out loud, but I want you to think about, what are the different ways that you support families around communication? Is it offering a space? Is it helping to facilitate discussions? What kinds of things do you want families to talk about? Where do they go to talk about this? And something to ask families for some, you know, is not just you need to make social connections, we're the ones telling them that, but what do they want in these social connections? What do they want from someone who can help support them, or what do they want from a friend? All right. So, of course, because it's me, I'm always going to continue going back to that virtual social network world. So I do want us to consider social media. You know, how does social media play a role in all this? Does it get in the way sometimes? You know, what, if anything, do you miss about human connections? That's a big piece. I used to be completely anti all social media because I do believe that when we're able to be in a face-to-face interaction, it can be, I think, more impactful on the relationship and a bit stronger, but we don't always have that ability to get face-to-face for lots of different reasons. So I'm definitely in the boat of, let's find a way to help folks communicate on whatever level that might be. So it's something to think about. You know, what do we think about social media? Do we need it? And then also something, depending on the age of your children, what do we want our children to have in terms of social media? Do we want them to be able to communicate in different ways? And I know there's a lot of scary stuff when we think about teens, what's on social media, but I also think there are opportunities for folks to engage as well in groups. You know, I've talked to a few teens who have different groups that they're involved in where folks have the same likes or have faced similar issues. So I definitely think it's something to consider and something to engage our families in terms of a dialogue around how do they use social media? Is it helpful for them? How do they see their children using it? So it's just something that I want to point out and I want you guys to be thinking about. All right. I have a feeling this is not going to work because it is actually something that I would play, and it's a story from a mom. I could try it really quick, but I'm going to try it really quick, and then Debbie, you tell me if it's working or not.
All right.
Oh.
So I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, so that means it didn't work. I will see if I can somehow get that audio recording pushed through, but it's a mom who's talking about a situation that happens where every day she's trying to get her children in the car to get them to school. And she sees this black truck drive by every single day. And then one day when she's dropping her children off, she actually sees the black truck pull up to her children's school. And so it's really about her taking a risk and going up to the other parent and communicating and getting to know each other. And then through that friendship, they actually realized that they live close to each other. They started relying on each other, talking to each other, and then helping support each other to drop off their kids at school, pick them up. So it's just something about, sometimes we go through the motions, and she really took a risk and she decided, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I need some support. And so they developed this friendship. I think is a really good mechanism to have families hear this story and to think about, what would they have done in that situation and to look through some of these questions. So it's something you could definitely do with families when you're considering supporting them through building more social connections. So I will see if I can get that sent out to you. And I really apologize for this technology challenge because it makes me feel like we're missing out, but thank you all for being patient. All right, so social connections, these are some actual everyday practices as well. So we can talk about children and parenting when we're with other people. We can see other parents in action. That's one of the elements that I think is great about a parent-child interaction group is it's not only the parents and their child, but it's other parents as well. So they get to share in that experience of seeing their children engage with other peers, but also engaging with the families and seeing the families engage with their children. I think I've learned a lot from friends when I've seen them do certain interventions with their children or respond in certain ways. It actually, sometimes I'll go, wow, yeah, I want to do that too. I want to be a parent like that. So it gives us opportunities to look at what we want to do and how we can grow. It's a good way to give and get advice, share resources, share the joys and challenges of parenting. So that was the ups and downs, trading childcare. I think that's a huge thing if we have the opportunity to be able to support and say, why don't you bring your kiddos over today? And if you need to run to the store, well, I have them at the house. That is one of the most precious experiences is being able to go to the store by yourself as a parent, is just having that time to really pick out in a thoughtful way the groceries that you need. So I think of that as something I do with my friends often is, hey, why don't you bring your kids over, or I'll bring my son over, and then I can just go to the store really quick on my own without the frustrations of a child grabbing at what's on the shelves and saying, I want. And then venting frustrations. We're not alone. A lot of times people think that their child is doing these things that are just so different than everyone else. And in some ways, there might be circumstances where it is, but chances are that there are other children doing the same things. Often I think that we're hiding them because we feel embarrassed. We're trying to diffuse the behaviors around other people, but kids are kids. They're learning. They're lacking in certain skills. They're gonna have tantrums. They don't know how to regulate when they're younger. So breakdowns are happening. All kids hit. Kids often try and bite each other. It's those primitive responses that are coming out. It's just we don't talk about it enough. We pretend that kids have to be these model citizens, but they're learning so many things. And so having opportunities to talk to other parents about the basic child development experiences, I think, is huge, so that we don't feel alone. All right, this is something I really recommend that folks do with families. It's called Who Would You Call? So it's an activity where you can have it on a piece of paper. You can do it a little bit more creatively, where you give cutouts of paper dolls or a template that has a figure of different people on it. And to pose the question to families, on the first doll or the first image, to write who you would call in an emergency situation for support. Give them a little bit of time to do that, and then have them go to the second one and say, now if you couldn't get a hold of that first person, then who would you call? And have them go through that until they get all 4 of the people filled out with their names and who it would be that they would reach out to, because we do need to know who our social connections are. And sometimes if we don't talk about it, we think maybe we're connected to certain people, or maybe we think we're not. Maybe we think we don't have people to count on, but we really do. So I think it's an important activity to go through with families and to engage them in dialogue. Also to ask follow-up questions of, what makes you feel like you feel comfortable calling this person an emergency, or how has this person supported you in the past? And then also to ask, why is it important to have a support system? How is this person connected to you? What happens when you don't have a support system? So really to engage families in that dialogue, to really deconstruct the importance of having social connections. Has anyone ever, I'm going to pose this out to the group, has anyone ever sat down with families and really done something like this, where they talked about not only the importance of social connections, but really talked them through, who would you call if something like this happened, and engage, who would be your second call, so that they could get a feel for, what the support system is around their families. And really, in some ways, I look at this as helping a family to create their plan of what to do in certain circumstances.
Okay, so you can either raise your hand, or if you want to give us more info, you can type into the question pane. Okay, looks like an activity folks can add to their to-do list, because I don't think we've got anybody who's tried it out. Oh, Maria, I don't know if your hand's up from this time or last time, but got one hand up.
Okay. I definitely think it's something to try and do with families, because like I was saying, even though innately we might know that social connections are important to reduce the feelings of isolation, we sometimes, and often, not even sometimes, but often have to help families to build those social connections. I know that a lot of folks who are probably on this call were first a family who came to their FRC needing support. What would it have been like for you if someone had overtly, really directly said, let's look at your social network, let's look at the support you have around you, let's make concrete plans. Not just you have supports in your life, but who would you call in case of an emergency? Who would you call if you couldn't get a hold of that person? Why is it important to have social connections? Why would it, what does it feel like when you don't? But to really ask those questions directly, so that it gets families thinking about that kind of stuff. And then doing activities. I think that in parent support groups, I think it's great to be able to share stories, but even in an activity around, say you've been in a series for 6 weeks, so the families have gotten to know each other pretty well. Before the end of that series is over, really sitting down with families and saying, hey, today we're going to spend some time building our support systems. We're going to make plans of who we can contact at different times. We're going to talk about the things that we can ask for help for, but really sitting down and doing concrete activities with families. All right, so this, I'm going to have the closed captioning on. It's only about 2 minutes, so I'll play it till the end. And it's a cute video about a mom who is at the park with another mom and a couple moms out there socializing. But it's really about the struggles that we go through as parents and that we're not alone and how we can seek each other for support. So I will put this on full screen. I apologize you won't get the music, but at least we can look at what's being said. That was actually kind of funny. I looked at some of the closed captioning and it it wasn't exactly what they were saying. She, at one point it said standing in front of another bus, but it actually was standing in front of another mom. So I apologize for that. I thought the closed captioning would be a little bit better, but it just showed, you know, when the mom who's the lovey dropped from, she turns around and has coffee spilled as well, that they definitely experience the same things. The first mom is envious of the two people sitting down on the blanket and wishing that she had a mom friend like that. And it's a cute kind of play on a romance where they are about to part ways, but then they turn around and they find each other and they definitely connect because it's important to have those friendships. So the next concept that I'm going to switch to is, I imagine at some point folks have heard about parent cafes or community cafe models. It's definitely a way to build social connections and to really enhance community at your FRC. I am actually going to have, Debbie and I are going to put on a mock pretend community parent cafe at the regional trainings in the spring. There's one on March 3rd, 4th. Ooh, it's Wednesday. Let me find the dates. They're in LA. It's going to be in March, and it's actually on the 4th and 5th. So the second day of the training on Thursday the 5th in the morning, we're going to do a pretend parent cafe. And then in Sacramento on April 23rd and 24th, we have our regional training. On the second day, on the 24th, we'll have it in the morning. But what's really cool, I've gotten to take part in one of these before, is it's actually something that we put a lot of intention and thought behind. So you have separate tables set up depending on the size of the group you think you might have. Generally, it's about 4 to 5 tables. And you actually set it up in a like a cafe with tablecloths. Sometimes people will put candles, flowers. Usually you put some type of art paper, sometimes treats or food. And then you have a facilitator that's actually stationed at each table. And the facilitator is going to be asking a question. Each table has a different question. Questions might be, how do you balance your children's needs with your own? Another question might be, who are the most important influences on you as a parent? And you're given about 15 minutes per table, and then the parents are actually asked to rotate. The facilitator takes notes, or folks actually write down their responses, key phrases, draw pictures on the art and the artwork that is left on the table for them to use. And then most of the time at the end, you actually have a share out where we look over some of the responses for the questions, and they call it a harvest. So it's actually harvesting the thoughts of the families and harvesting the amazing knowledge and information that they bring in. It's a beautiful thing to witness. It really is something that engages families a lot more in your agency. It also drives a lot of the activities and needs of the families, because you're really taking a lot of feedback from them. And so it can also, sorry, I'm losing my voice. It can also be something that doesn't necessarily have to be questions around like balancing your children's needs, but you can use this when you're looking at things that you want to bring into your FRC. So, it's really about engaging families in the process of driving their own resources and activities, because as we know, FRCs are community-based organizations. They're meant to impact the community around them, and it's a great way to get families involved in the way that we can move forward. So it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. I'm very excited to be able to do a mock one with folks who attend the regional training, so that they can have that experience about what it feels like to be asked those questions and to be engaged in that dialogue. And then also, like I was saying, there's a lot of thought that's put in around it. It's a beautiful situation that's set up. There's flowers and tablecloths in it. It feels special. And I think that that's something that families don't always get to witness. There are
Karen,
specific.
can I share? I'm sorry. Are you go finish your cafe? Ahead. Okay. Maria shared back on, because I remember I said I think she raised her hand on the activity where you have people identify their support system. And she said this is a powerful activity to do with parents. It helps them identify their network and support them. And one family I was working with identified the grocery clerk as part of their network.
Wow.
And yeah. I can actually remember when we were having a real crisis with one of my kids, I found myself standing at the grocery counter telling my whole story to the grocery clerk, who then told me where to find my new doctor I needed. It was the weirdest thing,
Yeah.
It's just so you never know.
You never know where people are going to be that are going to help you. When my son was, I think 8 months old, we were at the grocery store. I was at the grocery store by myself, and he was just rambunctious and wanted to move. And I was in line, and he actually reached out for the cashier, and she took him and held him the whole time that she checked me out of the grocery store. And it actually was a very calming situation, because I had been trying to, balance all these groceries and trying to do all this stuff while I was shopping, and just her holding him for a second allowed me to kind of regather myself, to put my phone number into the Safeway pin pad. So it's interesting. You never know where you're going to find that support from other people. But that's beautiful that Maria's used that before. And really, I think that it's, like I said, it's one thing to say we need social connections, but it's another thing to be able to really look at the opportunities that we create for families, or to be able to really help families to deconstruct that and look at that in a more thoughtful way. So let's see, family cafe guidelines. So these are things that you'd want to have a poster that you either color or print out, a few posters potentially around the room. We want to make sure that we do set the stage for productive conversation, and we want to review these with folks before we sit down to have the facilitators engage them in dialogue about the questions. But we want to make sure that we focus on what matters, that folks listen, and that they're listening in a way that they want to understand. We're not engaging in arguments or anything like that. Everyone's opinion is valued. We can connect ideas. You can play, doodle, draw. Sometimes folks will also put fidgets on the table for sure. Paper, markers, things that people can multitask with or express themselves in different ways. We want to contribute to thinking and experience. We want to listen together for patterns and insight and deeper connections. And I wanted to really quickly finish up with looking at concrete examples. So this isn't something you necessarily have to do right now, but I would encourage you. Usually I do this earlier, but I wanted to give you the opportunity after we've talked today to think about some concrete examples that you either already do or might try and do to help build social connections. So again, the strategy for this protective factor is facilitating friendships and mutual support. We are helping parents and caregivers connect with each other and develop social networks. Everyday actions that we can take. We help families value, build, sustain, and use social connections. So a concrete example could be we're actually engaging in a family support group, but we are encouraging them to talk with each other about ways that they could support each other. Obviously, it wouldn't be the first parent support group, but maybe session number 6 or 8, where we actually are encouraging families to talk about maybe they could set up a texting system where when they're really frustrated, a parent that they feel comfortable with in the support group, they could just shoot them a text message that says, oh, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed right now. And the family could text message back and things like that. So it's really helping encourage them to sustain and use social connections, creating an inclusive environment. That could be, we could try a parent cafe. You know, we could look at different ways that we look at our signage around the FRC. Are we making sure that we're actually naming things? Like we could have a poster that says, are there ever times when you're frustrated? Reach out for support. Facilitating mutual support around parenting and other issues. That I think is the heart of parent caregiver support groups, really facilitating discussion, letting folks know they're not alone. Promoting engagement in the community and participation in community activities. I think a lot of folks do that. You know, I know at Support for Families, they do Access to Adventure, where they actually meet out at Golden Gate Park. Families engage with each other and explore the California Academy of Sciences or different activities around Golden Gate Park. So those are all things that I encourage you to really look at those everyday actions and write some of the concrete examples that you already do and some of the ideas that you have moving forward. And that is it. So any questions that folks might have, any ideas that came up today? Like I said, I really appreciate everyone hanging in there with me today with you know, the inability to get the sound on the videos, and then also for me coming into this a little bit rattled from the experience I had earlier. But I do appreciate it. So anything that you guys want to ask, anything come up for you during this today?
Okay, so you can type into the question panel, or if you have if you're on the phone or have a microphone, we can unmute you if you want to raise your hand.
All right, does that mean no questions out there,
No
Debbie?
questions. That means you answered everything. Here we got one. Is there a website link or reference on the Parent Cafe?
There is. So what I can actually do is they have a complete guideline. It's like a maybe 15 pages that tells you from different steps to take to make sure that you can follow through with the model. So I will actually send that to Debbie so that Debbie can have it posted or sent out to you guys with this information. And what I'll do is maybe I'll see if I can actually also post it on social media. But yes, there's specific guidelines and there's specific step-by-step process. And I will also bring the packet so that folks can follow that. I'll bring it to the regional trainings as well so that folks can take that home if they decide to implement it. So you will get it in multiple ways, but yes, there is a packet that goes step-by-step for you.
Okay, and that just so you all know, Karen shared the dates with you for the regional trainings, which are going to be March 4th and 5th in Los Angeles for our SoCal folks, and April 23rd and 24th in Sacramento for Northern California. Registration is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and the links will go to the director at the FRC. So if you're staff and you're interested, you can maybe let your director know that you would perhaps like to be chosen to attend that. You will get a follow-up survey as we close out. Those are very helpful for us. If you just take it's pretty fast, take a few minutes to finish that for us. That helps us guide the the professional development that is provided to you in the future. And I think that's, if questions come up, you also will get, I think you all have our contact emails, but mine comes up in the follow-up thing that you get from GoToWebinar. So feel free to let us know if questions come up in the future. Anything else, Karen?
No, I think that's it. And I just want to say, well, that's it. And then I go into what I want to say. I really appreciate all the steps that folks take at the FRCs to support families. And I know that the basis of the work that you're doing is this parent-to-parent, caregiver-to-caregiver support. And I just want to acknowledge that I know that so much of this is happening already. And hopefully that there were some ideas today that were shared on ways to maybe do some specific activities to support families, because we all know, and when we've been there, parenting is hard enough. And when we parent and we feel like we're by ourselves, it can be so much more difficult. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for being there for each other, because this is a hard journey, you know, and when there are other things thrown in our paths, when we're dealing with layers of parenting, whether it be mental health or behavioral or special health care needs, this is not easy stuff. And it is more important than anything else we do to impact the lives of the people that we share, the people that we support. So thank you so much for that.
All right, well, Karen, thank you as always. Fabulous webinar. I learned something every single time. So, all right, well, this will end the webinar for today, and we will see you all on the next one. Have a good afternoon.